ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवम् श्री राधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश नम ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So welcome to the Vaishnav Vrinda Part 2 series, which is every Tuesday and Thursday. So we began this series in the last class with a very important discussion. So this whole second part series, after discussing Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's essay on Vaishnav Ninda, this whole part series is more like a discussion based on the practical application point of view and from the Shastric point of view. So we discussed how this part 2 is, criticism is born out of from envy, a definitive analysis. Now this analysis is Shastric as well as some practical application. And the second part will be qualities of one free from envy. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's deliverance of criticizers and his instructions from the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So we began the last class with understanding these terms, dislike, jealous, and envious. And what is the difference between jealousy and envy? So somebody also sent me a small clip of one of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam lecture. And Prabhupada in that lecture is saying that if you are jealous, you are in the material world. It's a simple thing to know. So it's a simple test. If you are jealous about something, then you are in material world. You are in material consciousness. So Prabhupada's lecture was brilliant about it. And Prabhupada gives the example, there is no need for any proof for you you can test yourself. And he gives the quotation from the Bhagavatam, Bhakti Parishanubhava Viraktircha Anyatra. Chaisha Trika Ekakala Prapadyamanash Tushti Pushti Shuddhapayanu Ghasam. Just like one who is very hungry and he takes his meal, he feels tushti, satisfaction, pushti, energy, and hunger is mitigated. All three things happen. So similarly, it is, no one need to give you a certificate that you are pure. You'll have to see inside your heart whether you feel jealous, you feel envious, whether you have this disliking, these kind of feelings. So if you are not free from these anarthas, especially the Shadarupa, Kama, Kama, Krodha, Moha, Mada, Matsare, Lobha, all these 6 feelings, you can judge yourself. So that's what Prabhupada was mentioning in that lecture. Very beautiful explanation. So we saw these terms, how they are, each of these words which we use, there are degrees. And the difference is when you're jealous, you burn. And when you're envious, you want to burn the object of whom you are jealous. So that is the difference. Then we saw this important statement of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, not to criticize on devotees and non-devotees. Best is to introspect within ourselves whether we are free from lust, we are free from deceit. And don't worry about others. Guru and Krishna will take care. And you have no right to criticize. And we saw this beautiful story of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the pastime in Dhaka, what happened. So this is here we ended our discussion in the last class. So today, we will do, after a little practical understanding of jealousy and with this pastime of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, today we'll be doing a little Shastric analysis about why we criticize, what is the reason we criticize, and we go into a little analysis from the Bhagavad Gita to understand. And this is the theme today. To criticize is the business of the mundane mind. The real reason, of course, the root is because that love of Godhead transforms into lust when we come in this material world and trying to enjoy this material world. And as sadhakas who start practicing Krishna consciousness, they have to deal with this lust, anger, greed, envy, all these anarthas. But one of the reasons we come into Krishna consciousness is genuine appreciation for the deities, the devotees, the holy name. And this appreciation is in the form of Shraddha. And with this Shraddha fructifying, that is the Agyat Sukriti fructifying, we also take up to the process of Krishna consciousness. And we quickly start making advancement in Krishna consciousness with the Sadhu Sangha and Bhajan Kriya. But we see that anarthas are very deep-rooted in the heart. And in our practice of Krishna consciousness, if we don't control the mind and senses, and especially purify the intelligence, because Krishna conscious philosophy means hearing from the Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. And we hear and we intelligently understand and we try to apply those instructions in our life. So when the intelligence doesn't get purified, and with the intelligence one doesn't control the mind and thereby control the senses over a period of time in our practice of Krishna consciousness, that same intelligence which is not purified, that same intelligence now takes pleasure in finding faults in others, finding defects in others. So we have to, if we have to become free from, this criticism, then it is pertinent that we control the mind and senses. So I'm now going to do a Shastric analysis from the Bhagavad Gita, and give the explanation of this pastime, what we have discussed in the last class, how criticism is born of envy, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's lifetime, the pastime which happened. So now we will do the Shastric analysis. I will take two verses and then take up the question answers. Till then, I will not take up the question answers. So let us systematically try to understand these two verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Then I will take up the question answers. And then after that, I'll take another two verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And then I'll take the question answers. So this is from the Sthita Pragya section of the Bhagavad Gita. We know that Arjuna asked these four questions. What are the symptoms of a self-realized soul? Sthita Pragya ka bhasha samadhistasya kefeva sita dhi kim prabhasheta kim asita kim vrajeta kim. So there are four questions which Arjuna asks. What are the symptoms of one who is a Sthita Pragya? Ka bhasha means symptoms. And kim prabhasheta. Kim prabhasheta means how does he speak? Speak means when he is put in difficult situations, when Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika and Adi Devik kleshas affect him. So being detached from the body, how does he see them? He's not affected by them. And when happiness or he's praised or there is criticism, how does he see this? So that is Kim Prabhasita. Kim Asita is how does he sit? Now, how does he sit means it's not like physically how does he sit in a nice posture. So how does he sit here means how does he control his senses? So this answer to Arjuna's question begins actually from 2.59. 2.59 of the Bhagavad Gita, where it is mentioned Yada samharate chaham kurmo angani sarvasha indriyani indriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Just like a tortoise withdraws its limbs, similarly one who is self-realized, he withdraws his senses from the sense objects. So this is more like a Ashtanga yogi who does pratyahar, withdrawing the senses from the sense objects. But the next verse mentions Yatato hi api kaunteya Purushasya vipaschita indriyani pramatini haranti prasabam mana. Although somebody endeavors like this, yatato hi api kaunteya. Yata means to endeavor, to withdraw the senses from the sense objects. Purushasya vipaschita. This transcendentalist is a man of discrimination, vipaschita. But what does Krishna say? Indriyani pramatini. The senses are highly intoxicated for enjoying the sense objects. Indriyani pramathini. Haranti prasabam mana. They drag the senses drag the mind into sense enjoyment. So that is what Krishna says in 2.60. In 2.61, Krishna says, Tani sarvani sanyamya yukta asita matpara vashe yasya indriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. So Tani sarvani sanyamya. Tani means all these. Sarvani means from all directions. Sanyamya means to control. And yukta asita matpara. Yukta means to link. And matpara Krishna is saying here. So this verse specifically speaks about engaging the senses in Krishna's service. So directly this is like Bhakti Yoga process. Vashehi yasya indriyani. Then the senses get purified and the senses can be controlled. Tasya pragya pratishtita. Such a person is said to be in divine consciousness. So in one sense, this verse 2.61 hints that only by the process of Bhakti Yoga one can completely control the senses. Whereas the other paths of negation, especially the Jnana Yoga and the Ashtanga Yoga, one will be not successful. So that is what comes out from this whole discussion. So after discussing 2.61, Then Krishna here in 2.62 and 63, even if one has controlled his senses, but still if he contemplates on the sense objects, so how the degradation happens, that is being spoken in these two verses. So now let us discuss these two verses. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodha vijayate. For a person who meditates on the sense objects, dhyayato vishayan pumsa. Pumsa means a person who meditates. Dhyan means to meditate. Sangasteshu pajayate, attachment arises. From attachment arises desire. Sangat sanjayate kama. And from desire arises anger. Kamat krodha abhijayate. So this is the verse. Now I'll be discussing both Vishwanath Chakra Thakur, Baldev Vidyabhushan and Srila Prabhupada, what they have to say about this purport. And after discussing these four verses, in fact, we'll be discussing four verses, 62 to 65. Then I'll come to the explanation as to how the mundane intelligence takes pleasure in finding faults and criticism. And the only way we can come out of it is to control the mind and senses and purify the intelligence, where we can experience Krishna's grace and see everything by spiritual vision. So that is the whole discussion. So let us now take first Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan's commentary on this verse. Even for those who have controlled the senses, which was explained in 2.61, Vasheyi Yasya Indriyani. That is, even for Bhakti Yogis. That means Bhakti Yogis are not like Ashtanga Yogis or Gyan Yogis who just withdraw the senses from the sense objects and they don't engage the senses. They try to make them inactive, which is not the natural function of the soul itself. The senses are action senses, and the soul is also active. And those who are devotees, they engage the senses in the service of the Lord. So even those who have control like this, the senses, if they do not direct their minds to me, so while even engagement in devotional service, the mind can, mind has to be fixed in Krishna. If the mind is not fixed on Krishna, what is Baldev Vidyabhushan? It is inevitable that calamities will arise again. Calamities will come. This is expressed in two verses. So two verses explain that there will be calamities. For the yogi who repeatedly contemplates sense objects, thinking he will derive pleasure from them. So this is like contemplation is not just one time that some thought came, but when you ruminate upon it, when you start chewing upon it in the mind, and then it becomes stronger and stronger inside. And then I will enjoy. So then the intelligence is among the subtlest. The senses are gross and they take pleasure in gross sense objects. The mind feels a subtle pleasure. The subtlest of the subtlest pleasure is felt at the level of intelligence. So the scientists who do discoveries, they are, sometimes they can be detached from family life, detached from, worldly enjoyment, detached from even, eating worldly foods, but they are deriving some subtle intellectual pleasure. So the intelligence then what decides to derive pleasure? Then what happens? Attachment to those objects arise. Sangat, dhyayato vishayan pumsam, sangas teshu pajayate. So attachment becomes. Because of that attachment, thirst for pleasure from those objects arises. So there is trishna, thirst. I want to derive pleasure from those objects. So this is how the whole phenomena is happening, and Baldev Vidyabhushan is very systematically explaining. When that longing is thwarted by something or other, anger burning in the heart to counteract the obstacle arises. So here now the subtle feelings, I have a desire, I have a rag. Rag means attachment, to desire to enjoy one object. And when I go to enjoy that object, there is some obstacle. Somebody comes in between us. So then immediately what happens? There is kama, to desire to enjoy, and there is some obstacle. Kamat krodha vijayati. So when there is obstacle, then there is anger. So these kama and krodh, after kama is krodh. So manifestation of anger suggests that there is unfulfilled desire. Anger, manifestation of anger suggests in us the feeling that there is an unfulfilled desire, calm. So this is how it works to counteract the obstacle. One who is not Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. So one who is not Krishna conscious means completely Krishna conscious. So that time, still in the sadhana stage, there is sometimes the mind can get deviated to enjoying the sense objects. The senses require real engagements. And if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. So that is why it is pertinent for sadhakas to always keep the senses engaged in Krishna service, because the senses naturally glide towards sense objects or materialism, and the mind, even the mind has such a power that even a spiritual activity, it can, make it mundane. So that is why the mind has to get spiritualized and purified. And that is possible when we give real engagement to the senses. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects. And the only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada is giving a jolt. You can see that even Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, what to speak of other demigods, are under the influence of sense objects. So what to speak about we tiny human beings on planet Earth? And Prabhupada is using a very nice English word, puzzle of material existence. And the only way is we have to become Krishna consciousness. Then Prabhupada says, Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. So here, many times we might not understand why Prabhupada is giving example here of Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva is also a great devotee, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, and Lord Shiva has a sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya. But this example is spatially speaking about, Lord Shiva, who is seen as a yogi. So the comparison here is the path of yoga or the Ashtanga Yoga to the comparison is done with Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga comparison Prabhupada does. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi. But Haridas easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. So here Prabhupada is doing the comparison between Bhakti Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, and is comparing Lord Shiva generally not as a devotee, but as a Ashtanga yogi. In the outside world, people, think that Shiva is a yogi and they try to follow in his footsteps. So from that perspective, Prabhupada is speaking here. As illustrated in the above mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of Lord. So Prabhupada is quoted in this 2.59 commentary, Yadavadi Mama Cheta Krishna Padarvindo, Yamunacharya speaking in this Stotratnam, that since my mind is engaged in Krishna service, Nava Nava Ras. I'm experiencing newer and newer spiritual pleasure. And, the verse is there that to enjoy man, my curls, my face and my, uh, turns away in distaste. That's what Yamunacharya says in that verse. So Prabhupada is quoting that. That is the secret of success. So Prabhupada is saying the only secret of success is to more and more engage in devotional service and relish spiritual rasa. The jiva intrinsically needs to taste rasa. Either he has to taste mundane rasa or spiritual rasa. If he is not able to get spiritual rasa, then he will naturally glide down to mundane rasa. So as sadhakas, we should endeavor in sadhana bhakti more and more to engage in devotional service and take pleasure in only spiritual happiness. So that's the point Prabhupada is making. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression. This is the Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga path, is sure ultimately to fail, for the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. So the slightest thought we know in the Saubhari Muni pastime. So although he was meditating within the within the lake for 10,000 years, but one scene what he saw, the fish copulating, and he was agitated and he came out. So the path of trying to artificially restrain the senses, withdraw the senses from the sense objects, that is the path of Ashtanga Yoga or Jnana Yoga, is surely to fail. That's what Prabhupada is saying here. So the only successful process is the path of Bhakti Yoga. So this is what Prabhupada says. Now let us go to this next verse, and then I will take up the question answers. So kindly bear with me. Further, next verse is the continuation. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti bhramshat buddhinasho, buddhinasha pranashyati. From anger arises bewilderment. Krodhat bhavati sammoha. Krodh means anger. Bhavati means anger, turns into what? Bhavati means to become sammoha, illusion. So sometimes, in Hindi, you must have heard this term when two people are fighting. He tells, मेरा सर फिर गया तो देखो मैं क्या करता हूँ पता नहीं. In Hindi they say, So because of anger, when he speaks, what I will do, I don't know. Sammoha, in illusion, what I will do, I don't know. So Pramatini means the mind is mat. Mat means intoxicated madness, where we go into illusion and we lose discrimination as to what is right, what is wrong. From bewilderment comes loss of memory. Sammoha means bewilderment, comes loss of memory. Sammoha spriti vibhrama. From loss of memory comes loss of intelligence. Spriti bhramshat buddhi nasha. From loss of intelligence, one becomes completely destroyed. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. So here is, how the intelligence ultimately falls prey and victim to sense enjoyment. So this is like a gross kind of a fall down where intelligence, falls trapped to sense enjoyment. But at a subtle level, when the intelligence takes pleasure in finding faults, that is also a kind of fall down. And this is fully exhibited in the pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita. There were two extreme examples in the life of Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri had two disciples. One is Ishwar Puri and other is Ramchandra Puri. So Ishwar Puri, during his last days, Madhavendra Puri, when he was feeling separation from the Lord and he was lamenting in spiritual lamentation, Ishwar Puri was taking care of his spiritual master with all the menial services. And when his another disciple Ramchandra Puri came there and he saw his spiritual master in lamentation, he externally saw his spiritual master from external vision, and he said, "Oh Gurudev, why are you lamenting? You should be in Brahma Bhuta stage. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, na sochati, na kamshati, sama sarveshu bhuteshu, mad bhakti labate param." So, out of his audacity, he tried to instruct his spiritual master from a mundane vision, seeing. And Madhavendra Puri was angry at his disciple. He said, "Get lost from here. If I see you while leaving my body, I'll not attain the goal of my life." So, by displeasing Madhavendra Puri, Ramchandra Puri committed a great offense to his spiritual master. Ramchandra Puri left that place and he ultimately came to Jagannath Puri. And in Jagannath Puri, his habit was what? Just to find fault in Vaishnavas. So he used to go to the Vaishnavas and accept prasadam, and then he used to feed them, and he used to overfeed them. And the devotees, because Madhavendra Puri is a very senior disciple and a sannyasi, they used to somehow have it, and then he used to blame them. "Oh, you Vaishnavas, you are not Mita book. You are what? You are overeating people." So that's how he used to find fault. So among all Vaishnavas, he started finding faults. And then Vaishnavas tried to avoid him. The moment they see him, they used to avoid him. Ultimately, he found fault with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was regularly visiting Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was tolerating him. And one day he saw ants in Gambira. And he interpreted, "Oh, ants, that means there are some sugar sweets. You are secretly eating sweets. A sannyasi is not supposed to eat sweets." So that's how Srila Madhavendra Puri, Ramchandra Puri found faults even in the Lord. So at last, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how did he take this? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, he did not defend himself. No, these ants, I am not having any sweets, please come and check. He just humbly accepted it. And he reduced his prasad intake to half. And the devotees, all Vaishnavas were very upset. "Oh, this Ramchandra Puri, when will he leave this place? He's giving so much trouble to the devotees." Ultimately, Ramchandra Puri slowly left the association of Vaishnavas and he went away. So this criticism, which is the business of the mundane intelligence, this is what happens. This is being graphically described in these two verses. So I've just discussed the verse, and suddenly this pastime of Ramchandra Puri came. So I discussed, because that has bearing on what we are discussing. Second point, what I wanted to mention was how this whole phenomena works. There is one true story which I heard from a sannyasi, and I very well believe that it is a true story, about one of the devotee families which was staying in the apartment in Bombay. And opposite to their apartment was a family which was staying, both were educated, highly qualified, studying, working in big companies. And somehow the husband and wife were watching the TV, and the husband wanted to watch the cricket match, the wife wanted to watch some serial. So there was some heated debate. And because of this desire to watch the cricket match, the husband got angry and the fight ensued. And suddenly they had a kid. The husband took the kid and just threw it out from the window, right from I don't know how many floors. And then suddenly the wife realized what had happened. She went running down from the apartment to see what has happened to the child. And by the time this husband realized what he had done, and he also jumped and gave up his life from that floor building. So the phenomena is what? Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsan. He had attraction to see that cricket match. Sangasteshu Pajayate. There is deep attachment. Then Sangat Sanjayate Kama. So when there is an obstacle, then there is anger. So the wife wanted to see the other serial. The husband, no, I want to watch the cricket match. And then there was obstacles, so he became angry. So when anger comes, what happens? Krodhat bhavati sammoha. Sammoha means there is bewilderment. We become bewildered. And when we are bewildered, there is loss of memory. So that husband forgot, his memory was erased. Who am I? What I have relations with my child. He forgot that relationship. And Smriti Brahmshat Buddhi Nashu. And he took the child without, understanding his relation and just threw the child. And then he realized, oh, what I've done. But by the time it was too late. So this is how this whole subtle phenomena happens. So now let us see what the acharyas have to speak about this. Baldev Vidyabhushan again. From anger arises loss of discrimination, sammoha, of what is proper or improper action. From this sammoha arises destruction of memory of his plans to attempt to conquer the senses. Smriti Vibhrama. From this destruction of memory arises destruction of the determination necessary for the knowledge of Atma, Buddhi Nash. So the intelligence forgets to take the instructions of the Guru and Shastra, Sadhu Shastra, and it becomes completely controlled the mind and the senses. From destruction of determination, one again sinks in the ocean of material enjoyment and continues in samsara. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. So this is how Baldev Vidyabhushan line by line explains. Without surrender to me, the senses join the weak mind to the respective sense objects. So if the mind is not, completely surrendered to Krishna, the senses join the mind and the mind overpowers the intelligence, and with the intelligence schemes to ultimately enjoy sense objects. Therefore, one who wants to conquer the mind must worship the Lord. So we have to, worship the Lord, who is called as Ajit, who is unconquerable, but can be conquered by devotion. So there is a small footnote. Verse 60 spoke of the senses taking away the mind by force to sense objects. So I explained, yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschita indriyani pramatini haranti prasabham mana. So that verse 60 spoke about it, but how this senses drag the mind down to sense enjoyment, the whole phenomena is explained in verse 62 and 63. Verse 62 and 63 describe the effects coming from that. How exactly whole phenomena works is described in these two verses. So that's a footnote. Now let us go to Prabhupada's commentary on this. Prabhupada begins his commentary very abruptly, and he directly quotes Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami has given us direction. Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhini vastuna mumukshobi parityaga vairagyam falgu katyate. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know everything has its use in the service of the Lord. So here, Prabhupada is directly explaining how contemplation on the sense objects leads to degradation. So Prabhupada is giving a positive solution that you contemplate how the sense objects can be used in Krishna service. This is how you have to use our, buddhi, shastra yukti. That's what Prabhupada is giving. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects. And as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain the perfect stage of renunciation. So they cannot, these jnanis and yogis, they don't, they detach themselves from the material world, which is artificial. That is called as Falgu Vairagya. But here, it is mentioned here, Falgu, but Rupa Goswami is advocating Yukta Vairagya. Engage the things of this world in Krishna's service. The material world, the material energy is Krishna's energy. So engage the energy in the energetic. And that you have to also use the principle of Sharanagati, Anukulesya Sankalpa, Pratikulesya Varjanam. Whether those things which you are engaging, how will they affect my consciousness? Whether it will be Anukul or Pratikul. So that also, we'll have to use that formula also. Their so-called renunciation is called Falgu or less important. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord or the absolute truth being impersonal cannot eat. So Lord is impersonal, so Lord cannot eat. Whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables, a devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and that he eats all that is offered to him in devotion. So after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. So we have to take the remnants, and this mood also we should be there, that while taking prasadam, we should not be in the mood of enjoyer. And Krishna has enjoyed it and he has sent me in the form of prasad. Thus everything becomes spiritualized and there is no danger of downfall. So this is how Prabhupada explains his purport. The devotee takes prasadam in Krishna consciousness, whereas the non-devotee rejects it as material. So we should take the prasadam in Krishna consciousness. How Krishna has enjoyed this prasad. Shaka kari aswadane, Prabhu bole, say shak, Krishna aswadinalo. So that prayers are there, the Bengali prayers and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's prayers. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu are having prasadam, oh, this shak, how wonderfully Krishna must have tasted it. And now he has, sent us in the form of prasad. So we should take prasadam in a spirit of devotion and not in a spirit of enjoyment. The impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation. And for this reason, a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. So again, the Prabhupada has used that same term, slight agitation. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to not having support of devotional service. So the Gyanis, those are Jivan Mukta also, they can glide down because of not having support of devotional service. So let's see. Any questions you have regarding these two verses we have discussed? We have to discuss two more verses and then only we can summarize the discussion. But regarding these two verses, discussion and explanation, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, can you please explain more about having subtle pleasure and having intellectual pleasure? What does it exactly difference, or with some example?
Okay, so there are three levels of pleasures, material pleasures we derive. One is the sensual plane, another is at the mental plane, and third is the intellectual plane. The fourth is transcendental, it is spiritual plane, and that is where we experience spiritual ecstasy. So that's a complete different transcendental topic. But let us only deal with this. So the sensual plane is happiness derived from sensual enjoyment, like people outgo and eat and they feel happiness in that. So that is quite gross. There is gross contact of the senses and the sense objects in the form of eatables, and so that is there. At the same time, there is a kind of subtle material pleasure, mental pleasure we are experiencing. Wow, what a uh, what a spicy item it is. So at the mind level also, there is a kind of enjoyment we are experiencing there. Now, again, to give an example, just like the eyes are attracted to beautiful forms. So there is, there is no physical, contact with the object, but there is only the eye contact, that is the senses. But when there's a physical contact, then there is a, cross enjoyment at the please don't type anything while the question answer is going on. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. So what I was explaining is, first there is even when we see a form, there is a kind of pleasure at the mental level we derive, and maybe we might enjoy the form that is at a sensual level. So these are mental and sensual pleasures. Now Prabhupada explains about mental speculation, about taking pleasure in poetry, taking pleasure in music, taking pleasure in painting, artistry. So these are kind of happiness. We take pleasure in music and all. These are like kind of mental pleasures. The intellectual pleasures are again, there is like not a you cannot have a clear demarcation, because all three levels there is a kind of enjoyment. But intellectual pleasures are basically more research oriented, when you come up with some new invention and come up with some new thing, and you derive some pleasure out of it. The Brahmanas in the Vedic times, when they used to, Panini has sutras, and sutra means in a short code you explain the whole mathematical equation. So the more shorter they make, the more pleasure they derive in it. And somebody who comes up with such a sutra, the bliss he experiences, again, it is not completely a Ananda Ambudhi Vardhanam, the spiritual pleasure. The bliss also what he experiences is the bliss a Brahmana experiences when a child is born, a baby boy is born for him. So that is the kind of explanation given. So these are the three levels at which one experiences these pleasures: sensual, mental, and intellectual. I hope it is clear, Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, it's clear.
Okay. So there is one question in the chat box by Yamuna Mataji. Okay. It's not a foolish question. It is a very nice question. How to genuinely differentiate the mind and the intelligence? Now, the inner world, especially when we deal with Bhumi, Apo, Analo, Vayu, Kham, earth, water, fire, air, ether, these are gross elements, and analysis we can do and understand because they are also externally we can see. But the inner world, especially mind, intelligence, and false ego, these elements are quite subtle, and to understand them analytically and discriminate and to conquer them is a little difficult, because they are in the inner world and the elements are very subtle. They can be understood by symptoms. So it is only by symptoms we can understand. So that is why Kapil Dev in the Kapil Shiksha analyzes the 24 elements and gives the symptoms. So, and especially graphically personifying them makes us deal with how to deal with the difference between the mind and the intelligence. So this is how we'll have to do it. We cannot analyze the elements and discriminate and understand. It is only by symptoms. Like, I'll give you one example to understand. How do we understand when we are working with the mind or when we are working with our intelligence? So when we think about immediately uh, uh, deriving some sense pleasure, immediately we want to plan and immediately go for it. It is especially the mind. The mind wants to immediately act upon it. That means we are working with our mind. But when we work out our intelligence, we think from the long term. We discriminate. Oh, the pros and cons. If I go for this, what is the effect? If I go for that, what will be the effect? So like that, when we use our discriminative intelligence, then we are working with our intelligence. So there is no like a clear-cut barrier. This department is mind, this department is intelligence. It's a very fine discrimination because they look like one. But immediately you see a sense object, there is rag, gulab jamun, you see, immediately the mind wants to go. So when immediately you want to act upon something, that means you are working with your mind. But then if you pause down and then you think, oh, already I had my food, and especially this is made of sweets, too much sweet eating is not good for me. And like that, you start now thinking from the long-term perspective, then you're working with your intelligence. So like that, there are many tools which we can use to understand the working and the difference between the mind and the intelligence. Kapil Shiksha speaks a lot about it, and there it is mentioned. And one can also graphically also personify the mind. So one example I'll give for that so that we can understand this. Like, suppose one is going in a car and he's driving the car. So the car is the body, the driving steering is like the mind, and the person who's driving is the soul. And you see a stranger come in, he stops, please help me, I also want to take a ride with you. And you allow him to come inside, sit next to you. So it is the mind, in fact. And when we come from the spiritual world to the material world, we come with the mind also. So this mind, who is your now next neighbor sitting in the car, its business, his business is to give you proposals. Now you are suppose driving the car from one point to another point, going to a temple. But then he will tell, oh, there's a nice restaurant. Why don't you go there? Let's have something. So you are driving the car, you know this person is a stranger. You will not immediately accept his proposal. You will evaluate with your intelligence. Is he my true friend? Is he telling in my best interest? I am supposed to go to the temple and have darshan and hear the lecture and have prasadam there. But now he's telling me that this is new restaurant and then there is here, nice preparations. Let me go and have here. Is it anukulasya sankalpa, pratikulasya varjanam? So like that, you will evaluate. So this is, everyone will do this. But the problem now for us is both the mind and the intelligence are within us. So when our mind proposes within us, we don't usually, do that evaluation and we immediately go for it. So sometimes when the proposals come from the mind, that is why we should graphically think of this example of the car whom you're driving and there is a stranger who is there next to you sitting and he is proposing this. So whether, we should go for it or not go for it, you have to evaluate with the intelligence. When we immediately just want to go for it, then we are working with our mind. But when we evaluate with our intelligence, then we are working with our intelligence. So like that, we have to understand. I hope it is clear. There's another question. What if a Vaishnava has very high attachment to another Vaishnava? What will be their gati? Attachment to pure devotees is the ultimate goal of life for us. And that should be basically on the spiritual platform. Yad Uttama Shloka Janashaya Rati. This is mentioned in the verse by Maharaj Amrish. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo Vachamsi Vaikunta Gunanuvarnane Karo Harer Mandir Majanadishu Shrutim Chakaryat Achut Katodaya. So these three verses which are explained how one should engage his mind completely at the lotus feet of Krishna by engaging all the karma indriyas and gyan indriyas in Krishna's service. And last two lines, Kamyam tu dasya na tu kama kamaya. When the desires come, I don't become the servant of those desires. Na kama kamaya. And last line is Yad Uttama Shloka Janashaya Rati. Rati means let me have deep attachment to those devotees who are always chanting the glories of Uttama Shloka. So this refers to the Mahabharats. So if our attachment to Guru is the spiritual master, Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, Goshta means Vrindavan, Goshtalayeshu means the eternal residents of Vrindavan, that is the Brajbasis, the pure devotees, and Radha Krishna and chanting. If we have all these kind of attachments, then definitely that is favorable. But usually in the sadhaka stage, this attachment is not completely on the spiritual platform. It can be on the mundane platform also. That we'll have to carefully evaluate. Any other questions? Any other clarifications anyone has? Two verses we discussed and so many questions. Yes, Maya Narasimha Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much, Prabhu. So these two verses, as you explained, this is talking only of one side of the contemplation. That is, if the desire is not fulfilled, anger arises. So if the desire is fulfilled, so it is said that the lobha arises. That is the greed for more desires. So can you show some light on that, Prabhu, in this connection?
The desire is fulfilled, then what happens? Those impressions are there, and these impressions become stronger, and further to enjoy those sense objects becomes stronger and stronger. So the desire becomes more deeper and stronger. So here, of course, you can see from that angle also reversely that from kama, krodha to lobha, but that is not the discussion here what Gita is doing. The Gita discussion is basically how the senses drag the mind into sense enjoyment and what is the phenomena internally happening. So how, because of that unfulfilled desire, there is anger. Anger leads to bewilderment of memory, and when memory is bewildered, you lose discrimination of what is good and bad, and then you take a wrong decision, and then the intelligence falls in the pool of material enjoyment. So that phenomena is being discussed. So we cannot mix those other discussions which are the degree of the kama to krodha, krodha to lobha, lobha, moha. Of course, moha there, and this parallel we can draw, but ultimately there the discussion is different. Here the discussion is different. So you cannot mix the two, first thing. And ultimately, what is kama? Kama to a subtler degree is lobha. And what is envy? The deeper, subtler level of kama is envy. So envy is also, in one sense, kama. Lobha is also, in one sense, kama only, but it is finer and subtler. That's the difference. That we can, usually draw a conclusion like that.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
There is one more question. One more hand was raised. Birendra Yadav Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, in verse 62, example of Haridas Thakur, it's a very elevated stage, Prabhuji. What about practicing devotees who are not at, who are at Anartha stage and, like us?
So, yes, definitely, Prabhupada is giving the highest example of Haridas Thakur. For us sadhakas, Prabhupada says one should chant 16 good rounds, or one should chant offenselessly 16 rounds. If we can do that, and if we can help in Prabhupada's preaching movement, either we assist in preaching to the preachers, or we directly assist in preaching, this is, giving out Prabhupada's compassion, and ultimately we'll be able to attract Mahaprabhu's mercy. And Mahaprabhu has promised this in his South India Yatra first instructions when he met a Brahmana there, Kurma Brahmana, that stay at home and practice Krishna consciousness and preach Krishna consciousness, and Vishaya Tarang, the Vishaya Tarang will never disturb you. That is the assurance Prabhupada gives and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives. So we should focus on trying to offenselessly chant the holy names and either assist in preaching or directly engage in preaching. Okay. Any other questions anyone has?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so now it's 8 o'clock. We are supposed to go till 8:15. We have seen up till, okay, we have seen up till these two verses. Now let me take 2 more slides and end the session today. I'll just take 2 more slides, just a few minutes, and then we'll end the session. So we discussed these 2 verses. Now let us let us see what are the emotions which happen, when this whole 2 verses are discussed. What are the emotions we go through? And by understanding emotions, at least we can detect, what is going wrong. So at the contemplation stage, what is the mind speaking? Let me just consider this for a moment. Something has come up on our WhatsApp message, it has popped up. Let me see what it is. And you enter there, you go there. And then you see some nice, beautiful pictures. Oh, I like it. Or you see a hoarding, there's some new restaurant and the new pizza is there, and the mind sees it and it's a new restaurant. Let me consider for a moment. So that is Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsan stage. These are the feelings. Now I'm coming to the feelings. And then the mind says, oh, I like it. This is the stage of attachment. And then that attachment, when it becomes strong, you tell your friend, let me go there, let us go there. No, we are getting late. We have to go to the college. No, I want to go there. So from your voice module and the way you're expressing your feelings, actually there is lust coming out. I want it at any cost. So that has become, that attachment has turned into now krodh. Sangas te shupajayate, sangat sanjayate kam. And then I want it at any cost means I'm lusting for it. And then, your parents say, no, you are not supposed to go there. You're not supposed to have it. It's not good for your spiritual life. Who can stop me from getting it? That is krodh manifesting. So this is the feelings, what are happening internally, I'm speaking. Then sammoha. Sammoha means confusion about what is good and what is bad. You lose the viveka. what is good, what is bad for me. That is Vivek Buddhi, what we call. That is Sammoha. When anger comes, anger bewilders our intelligence. Moha, it puts us in moha. The intelligence becomes bewildered. So then we forget to apply this principle. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. Smriti vibhrama, forgetfulness of good and bad, vibhrama happens. Then buddhi nashes, mistaking the bad to be good. And then there is fall down. So this is how the emotion levels we go through this. So from contemplation to attachment to lust, it becomes, the emotions become deeper, deeper and stronger. And once we go to the stage of krodha, then coming out becomes difficult. Then it leads to further gliding. And from here onwards, it's like, going down the hill. So that is why at these first two stages only, one should, what it is said, in the saying in English proverb, nip it at the bud. So at this first, second stage only, we should, try to take care of it. Once it is lust and it becomes very strong, then anger will manifest. And with anger, there is bewilderment of memory. If there is no obstacle in enjoying the lust, it doesn't mean that one is not going through these stages. You will go through these stages. And because you have lost that discrimination, because of being attached to your object of attachment. The object of attachment leads to moha, and then smriti vibhrama, and then buddhi nasha. So this is how we can see from the emotional perspective what are the feelings, what one goes through from these two verses. Now, what is the relationship between buddhi and smriti? Smriti means memory. Memory of the words of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. We can say smriti is directly what? Memory. So we know the personification of this verse, the pastime, is the Ajamil's pastime. Ajamil's pastime is a case law for these two verses as principles in the Bhagavad Gita. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsan. He just saw that scene of the prostitute being hugged by a drunkard. He just saw it, he became fearful. But while going back, in his mind, he was contemplating that scene, that picture, that image was repeatedly coming in his mind. So the image, when you see a image, the sense object, the image is imprinted in the mind. And when we contemplate, the image starts becoming bigger and bigger. It starts growing deeper and deeper and becomes stronger and stronger, the image. So while Ajamil was, going back, these images were coming back and back again. And that time he was trying to remember the words of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. He was using his smriti to remember Guru, Sadhu and Shastras. But somehow he was not able to what? Completely take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So in one sense, buddhi is equal to smriti. In one sense, buddhi is equal to smriti. And the difference between material buddhi and spiritual buddhi is what? Material buddhi is a product of past karma. Because of my previous pious actions, I have material intelligence, I gain material knowledge, and I make, myself a good career in this material world. This is part of material buddhi, product of past karma. But spiritual buddhi is a gift of mercy. That will come in the next verses. Prasadam adhigacchati. By Krishna's mercy, because we completely take shelter of the Lord and pure devotees, so Guru, Sadhu and Shastra come to our rescue and somehow tell us not to go in that direction. We go to a devotee and reveal this is what has happened. And the devotee tells, okay, you just sit and chant here Hare Krishna Mahamantra and let us discuss, some pastimes from the Bhagavatam. And by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra and discussing these pastimes from the Bhagavatam, we become pacified. And the impressions which, just like Ajamil saw that scene, those impressions get immediately wiped away. So this is the effect of spiritual buddhi, and the material buddhi cannot help us. The material buddhi is completely under the dictation of the material mind and the material senses, which goes in the material world for material enjoyment. It is only the spiritual buddhi. So here, relationship between buddhi and smriti is brought out. So this is where we will stop our discussion. The other two verses we will take it on Thursday. So any questions, any clarifications anyone has regarding these 2 points in the slide? There is a question in Krishna consciousness: who is our Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra? Firstly, in our Krishna consciousness, those who have joined ISKCON, our Shiksha Guru for the entire Sampradaya is Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is our Param Guru, Shiksha Guru, because we study his philosophy, his books. So he's like our, Shiksha Guru there. And then the gurus are at different levels. There is a Shiksha Guru and the Diksha Guru, from whom we aspire to take Diksha, and from whom we also are connected by taking spiritual knowledge. So the Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru's function is very similar to, be a transferment via medium between the disciple and the Lord. So that are the Shiksha Guru, Shiksha and Diksha Gurus. The Sadhus are the previous Acharyas coming in the Guru Shish Parampara. And the Shastras are the Shastras which are sacred to our Sampradaya, like the Gaudiya Sampradaya, like Srila Prabhupada's books, ISKCON books, and then the various Acharyas' books. So like that, we have to see Guru Sadhu Shastra. That is how we have to understand. I hope it is clear. There is one more question. Yes, Maya Narasimha Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, my question is a little deeper. I feel for myself, I felt, Prabhuji, as a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga practice, as you said, by chanting 16 offenseless rounds, and one more thing also you said,
Preaching.
And assisting in preaching and directly preaching. These 2 activities, we can be assured that we will not fall prey to the material objects. But Prabhuji, first of all, chanting 16 rounds offenselessly itself is a great attainment. And I wanted to refer one verse, as you previously also quoted from Bhagavatam, where Krishna himself tells in the Uddhava Gita, Jata Shraddha Matkatasu Nirvinna Sarva Karmashu Veda Dukkatmakan Kaman Parityagepi Anishvara. Means in that struggle, the devotee is struggling, fighting so much to control his senses while practicing bhakti. Still, sometimes he falls prey to that. So Krishna is telling that don't become discouraged. So does it mean that we cannot become completely ceaselessly aloof from sense gratification even we are practicing, and occasionally we may also get those impulses and we should not worry about them so much and so much go into guilty consciousness?
Yes. So there, Tato Mam Bhajata Prita Shraddhalu Dridha Nishchaya. So that last, the second verse, first 2 lines, we'll have to see that. So this is a classic example of a Vaidhi Sadhaka Bhakta who is practicing Vaidhi Sadhana, and because he has not attained Anarth Nivritti, so it is, it is invariable that he will sometimes be struggling with his senses to control his senses, and sometimes he will be falling prey to sense objects. So there are 2 things which we have to understand. One thing is, one should not go in too much guilt consciousness and go into negativity and always be caught up in this. I'm not able to do it. This is kind of a negative attitude, and sometimes you can go on for years together like that. At the second time, one should not go to the other extreme that you don't feel anything, you don't repent only what you have not done wrong, and you just continue like that, carefree. No, again a balance has to be struck. So neither 2 extremes we should go, and we should remain in the center. We should sincerely repent in our heart and pray to Krishna, reveal to your spiritual mentors, and sincerely with humility pray to Krishna to give him strength, and just further continue. So this should be our mood and attitude. And one of the sannyasis mentioned to me that sometimes devotees become discouraged. Suppose some health issue comes up, there is some severe injury in the leg, or there is injury which is, you feel like an obstacle in my practice of bhakti. Sometimes it can become obstacle, but he was giving an example for dog. And practically I have also observed that sometimes the dogs fight and they get very severely wounded and they're injured, but they just continue. They just with their limping one of the legs, they just continue going on and on without too much worrying. It is only the human beings in the human form of life, they go into these anxieties. So like that, we have to learn also from nature that too much we should not get bugged up, what they say, no? That is the word they use. We should not get too much bugged up and just continue, maintain our enthusiasm. At the same time, we should not go to these two extremes. Two extremes means, don't just repent about it and just carry on, or too much go into negativity. Oh, I'm not able to control my senses, or not able to control my senses, and just, bully about it. So both these kind of extremes have to be avoided. I hope it is clear, Prabhuji.
Yeah, okay, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. So we will stop now, and we will take up on Thursday the other two verses. And then the point of discussion, Shastric analysis, is why, even as sadhakas practicing for many years, how we land up in, using our buddhi, trying to find faults and criticize. What is the reason for it? The reason is because we fail to control our mind and senses, and we need some standing. So we take up this stand and be in the association of devotees and do this prajalpa or criticism. So this discussion I will bring up in the next